Hello, welcome to another episode of AI Ranch. Today I'm together with Mikus Krams, who is the co-founder and chief of operations of the Trace.Space, the company which is building the next generation requirements software for hardware products. He has also significant experience in finance and operations. He has been the finance director of the Lokalise, and he has been with the company from the bootstrap phase up till the 50 million Series B phase, also in the Chili Piper and mentor to many startups. So will be the very interesting conversation with lots of operational details and learnings from his experience, and also how AI is changing things right now. So tell a bit about your journey. How did you start with all of these business ventures? What's your educational background, your business background, and how did you went from finance operations and now to AI related hardware products platform?
Yeah, sure. So my educational background, so I was studying finance and investments in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I got my master's there. Then I went to investment banking in London, did a couple of years there. And so that's where I first got encountered with the technology companies, especially at the phase where they're being sold to funds or being sold to strategic companies. And that was a very exciting also because a lot of the founders, for them, it was the pinnacle moment where they're exiting their company. Then I moved back to Latvia, and I had my first venture, a startup that didn't go anywhere, but it was a good learning experience, let's say.
And what did you do then?
It was it was supposed to be a monitoring device for people with Alzheimer's, and the idea behind it was that it wouldn't. It's not like an alert button. It would just monitor the patterns of how they're behaving. If they go out of the pattern, it would alert a relative, sort of in a much more gentle way, and say, "Hey, look, seems like they're doing something unusual. You might want to check up on them, but not, let's say, call the ambulance or something."
Why didn't work?
Because I wanted to put it on Amazon Alexa, but they actually allow you to only keep the audio recording window for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I basically needed it to be the whole time. And so the next option was to build your own hardware device. And
Sure.
I wasn't up for it. So
Sure,
it just wouldn't work. I mean, for me, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And and then I joined Lokalise because I ran out of money.
Okay.
So I needed a job. And I joined Lokalise. I was really happy with that. It was a very forward-thinking company, I would say, in Latvia. The founders they had good experience. It was a very good vibe from day one. And I also managed to get my friend Yanis, who's now my co-founder, also to be the head of sales in Lokalise. And so together we were there, grew the company from about 2 to 20 million of ARR. And then I left, and shortly after he left, and then we started Trace.Space.
We explain listeners like what Lokalise did and do right now.
Yeah, so Lokalise is a translation management system. So the key selling point is it makes it really easy for developers to integrate the app, the software that they're making, and expose the sort of the text snippets to to sort of the translators, and then they can just keep up the many versions of the languages, and it makes it really easy. It's sort of they implement it once, and they don't have to think about it again. And so, yeah, really some really powerful customers you can see on the website, like Stripe and Slack. So a really good company.
Okay, so you met your co-founder now in the Trace.Space in Lokalise, yeah?
Well, we knew each other before from kindergarten.
So you got him in the Lokalise. You worked there together.
Yes.
You grew the company really big, right? From very smart company.
Yes.
And it ended up like 50 million Series B round from CRV, yeah.
Yes.
So and then how did you decide to move on, and what did you do next?
So we both, you understand, we both had an itch for entrepreneurship, and we had seen some companies grow from the early days. So he was in Jama Software, I was in Lokalise, also in Chili Piper, working with the founders and let's say the senior leaders. And it's just something we thought we could be good at because we've seen some success, and we figured now is a good time as any to start something. And then coincidentally, also our third co-founder that Yanis knows for a while as well, he was already building a backend for what Trace.Space is today. And so that's how sort of things aligned. We spoke to investors, managed to raise a round really early, and that was really how we got started.
Okay, so you met with another person who was seeing this opportunity, and you had this business experience, and then you joined together.
Yes.
And the Lokalise, right? You mentioned chili piper as well, right?
Yeah. So between Lokalise and Trace.Space, I was a chili pepper for a year. The interesting comparison there is between let's say the customers count and the sort of the contract value. It was very, very similar, but from the inside, the companies were very, very different. So both remote, but still Chili Piper is kind of the founders are based in the US. It's very US centric. There's people in Europe, but it's kind of very sales driven culture. It's all about selling and sales and closing deals. And Lokalise, on the other hand, was more product centric, more engineering sort of driven and focused. And mainly that stems from just who the CEO is. And in Lokalise's case, the CEO was Nick Sustinos, who was he's an engineer, sort of a very good product person. And in Chili Piper, one of the CEOs that I worked close with was Nicholas, who was he's an engineer by education, but fundamentally he's a sales guy. And so for him that was more important. And he had been around in Silicon Valley and so on for almost a couple decades. So he's
that's interesting insight about the I mean, like either founder or CEO. And then okay, so in these positions, initially you started with this Alzheimer device as a founder. Then you went to you had education in finance. Then you go to the director of finance, and now you're operational person, right?
Yes.
And when I talk with you off camera, it seems that you're really deep in all sorts of operational things. So, were you always like that? You did your finance duties in like even like an operational manager, or what's the connection?
Yes, it's actually very accurate, because even when I was in the bank, where basically all you got to do is create the presentation, create the financial model, I was one of the few, if maybe the only person who would actually go and try to speak with the individual salespeople to figure out how do they actually do these things. Because one thing is how does the CFO explain the financial model, explain the operational model, but then it's a completely different story when you go talk to the people who are actually doing the work. And so for me, it was important to understand how did the numbers come to be? Like, where do they come from? Who actually puts the work in to make the numbers happen? And so I was very I always like to compare the message that I get from the top and the message that I get from the bottom.
So you were not the Excel person there. You were actually, when you see those numbers, you were actively pursuing the reasons behind the numbers, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And so maybe that made you a good CFO, basically, the finance director, because you were doing this differently than just like looking at raw numbers, right?
Yes, I think for me the most important was as sort of doing the finance job was to make sure that we reflect the truth, not just what we would like the truth to be. Because very often you say, let's grow 3x. Okay, but then you put the numbers together, you realize it's impossible, because you don't have the people, you don't have the leads, you don't have anything that can support this. And so it's much more helpful to actually go figure out what can we actually do, what are the things we need to do to grow this, what are the levers we need to pull. And the only way you do that is by going sort of bottoms up and really understanding how does the full go-to-market chain come together to generate revenue.
That's what you mean by bottom up, of like finance planning or operations?
Yeah, so you can do top-down planning, which is today we are 10 million, next year we want to be at 30, and you just sort of put the numbers in, whatever numbers need to be there to match that, and then your investors are happy and you can be happy. But the reality is not like that. You're very likely to fail the plan. But bottoms up is you actually go down and say, how much can each salesperson close? How many leads are we delivering? How much revenue are we getting from each of these contracts? And then adding that up to say, actually, so it looks like based on these numbers, we can grow 2.5, not 3x, but at least we're very certain. And we know what are the things we need to do in order to sort of push it. The other good thing that happens is it's not me as a finance person telling them what the numbers are. It's me asking them and them giving me the numbers, because when they sort of, let's say, miss the numbers, it's not, oh, well, you gave me the number and it's not my fault. It's actually, well, you gave me the number and you told me that's your best estimate. So if it's different, let's go through and see why is it different. Not just, oh, it's different and we failed. And
how do you plan to move forward? Like, you need to reach some higher goals, right? So from bottom up, is it just like you see what is the situation with current resources, and then if you add some amount of resources, you could go faster? Or how do you practically do this from bottom up?
That's, yeah, basically you see what more you can add. The only things to keep in mind is you might, for example, in marketing, you might have channel saturation, which happened to a lot of companies recently, where, okay, we have 10 junior salespeople, let's add another 10, seems to still work, but then you add another 10 and then the average cost just goes up, but the result goes down. So you can sort of say, actually, looks like the equilibrium, the channel saturation is reached at 25, and so let's stick to that and not grow more. But until you know that, you sort of need to push the resources until you figure it out. And then you can go into a whole, whether you have to start marketing to a wider audience, and then
so this finance planning and operations is like dynamic process. Like, you cannot fully be sure that this number of additional resources will achieve the desired result. You monitor it, right? And
well, you make a bet,
right,
and you hope that it works, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But if you have a reasonable bet, then it usually works. It's more about saying, well, if we add a lot of resources here, it's just part of a chain. There's stuff that happens before, there's stuff that happens after. Just because you increase something is not going to change the whole chain.
Yeah.
If you have, let's say, people closing deals, salespeople closing deals, you cannot have them close more deals if you don't give them more leads. So they need these opportunities to close. If they don't get, if the number of opportunities is the same and you expect them to close more just because there's more of them, it's just, there's no way. You cannot dramatically change your conversion rate without something dramatically changing somewhere else.
Yeah, well, this approach, bottom up, for finance and operations, I like it a lot. So you grew the Lokalise from the bootstrap phase to significant growth phase. So it seems that you started probably with quite chaotic environment, right? And you helped to put it in order, or was it already in a good shape? And what kind of learnings can you take for the Trace.Space from the Lokalise in Chile?
Actually, I mean, I helped grow it. I wouldn't say that it's just me. There's a lot of people that there. But the Lokalise journey was actually very. We actually came in without knowing much about it at all. So we actually had to learn ourselves, and we had these two phases of learning. Phase one was just reading the basic books, talking to, let's say, pretty simple, listening to pretty simple advice. And then we grew to a certain point where we said, actually, it feels like we're tapping out. We're sort of doing the same thing and it's not really working anymore. And that's when we kind of had this learning 2.0, where we dug in deeper, tried to figure out what really works, and found some really strong mentors. So we had the guys from GrowBlocks in Denmark. They had, it's again these two sort of leaders that had led 3 companies to IPOs or exits, and we worked with them to learn from them. There's some resources online, and so we had kind of these 2 phases of learnings. But the thing that I'm taking away to Trace.Space is because some of the things that we learned there, because of the developments in AI, are not applicable anymore. So even if we wanted to, it's not, just doesn't work anymore. But I think the main thing that I took away is to not overhire, and really to keep the teams lean, kind of very concentrated, good talent, pay them well, but really keep it really small. And we sometimes even announced some roles that we were looking for, and at the end of the day, we saw that the candidates weren't at the level where we wanted them to be, so we decided not to take any and just keep going with the same team. And now we see that was probably the right decision.
Okay. I would like, it's interesting from you to hear that some of the things that you did back then will not work anymore now. This is like, and this is related to technology. Like, can you explain a little bit what is that?
I think the most visible example is the junior salespersons. For example, how nowadays you don't have to hire 10 people to generate these leads for you. You can buy a tool, and then the tool costs about the same as a single salary, but it works day and night all the time, covers thousands of bases. It is an automated spam bot fundamentally, but if you sort of wrangle it well, it can deliver good results. But because that is happening in the market anyway, the junior salespeople are fighting against that. So even if you actually don't use the let's say the spam bots, what the junior salespeople are doing, they are working in the same arena as these spam bots, except they're doing it on a much larger scale. So there's kind of, even if I didn't want to do that, there's not really much point doing it let's say the old school way, because I just can't outcompete. So I'd rather go for numbers. I get lower conversion rates, but then I let's say send 10 times more traffic.
But what about operations, other operations rather than prospecting and sales processes? Is it that Lokalise grew so large, and right now you're doing it all over again, and these operational aspects do not yet apply to you, or you see already some frameworks that you take from what you did before and now you apply in your company?
I think mostly yes. Mostly we're too small right now to fully apply these operational concepts, but we do apply a few things. So one is in Chili Pepper we use decision memos, which was a thing that came from Bezos and Amazon.
What is the decision memo?
So the decision memo is really just in written form. You lay out what's the context, what's the problem, and you list out the decisions, and you let everybody contribute. So literally everybody in the team can write in and make a decision, and that's how we made some decisions like that.
Can you give an example? What like in the Trace.Space, how you have used decision memo?
The specific example would be initially we thought that we could do, let's say, bottoms up sales, sort of driven by individual engineers just wanting a better tool and paying with a credit card. We saw that doesn't really work anymore. We won't be able to sell into these companies with this route. And so we said now we have to take a more expensive go-to-market approach. And then in order to survive, not get sort of murdered in your, let's say, customer acquisition to lifetime value calculations, we essentially had to go into higher contract values. And this was a thing that it was a thesis that we just we kind of laid it out in a decision memo. There was a lot of discussions. Some team members were against going into these hires because higher sort of ACV contracts, because then we are building features that appeal to managers as opposed to building the best product for the end users. But at the end of the day, when you put it all together, you see, well, we can build features for end users only and die, or we can build stuff also for the managers and maybe live.
But so the decision to move from one market segment to another market segment in your company, this was communicated the whole team through the decision memo, right?
It's not just communicated; it's also they contribute. The team contributes.
So is it like a Notion page or
it's
something?
It's just a Google Doc.
Yeah, Google Doc where you just all of them by swarm intelligence just write things inside there, and then but then the final decision is still.
This was with me.
Yeah, so you made the decision based on the
what
sourced
people wrote,
information.
yes, what people wrote, what they contributed, and that's.
So and how do you decide when to write decision notes or just make decision?
When you feel like you have to deliberate more than otherwise, especially if it's kind of this one-way door versus two-way door, something like that. But I think the most important thing about decision memos is the deliberation, the fact that you're actually sitting down and actually making a conscious decision to make the decision. It's not like, oh, let's just give it a shot, see what happens, maybe do a bit of this, bit of that. You consciously sort of close a door, open another. And the most interesting thing is actually then going back to these decision memos and see what the logic we had at that time, maybe that's changed, maybe we need to rethink it. But that has been really interesting. And sometimes you're surprisingly consistent. You're like, oh, it's interesting. I thought about it this way 2 years ago and it's still valid, while other things are completely different because we sort of learn new things, think about it differently. So that's I find is the most valuable part.
Really interesting to hear such a like aspects of operations from person which would like primarily with your experience would be CFO, right? Financial operations, but actually it seems like these are, as you yourself say, that like day-to-day operations, all sorts of decision-making processes. So let's then move to your current endeavor, like the Trace.Space. So what is Trace.Space? What problem does it solve? What is your client?
So Trace.Space is so what it does in simple terms is, imagine before you're building a car, you have to agree on what you're going to build. So you have to write a literal contract between your suppliers, your customers, the regulators, your own company, and you have to write down all the things that how is the car going to act and feel and do before you start manufacturing. But the problem is you have about 10 engineering domains that need to be covered. You have thousands of engineers contributing to this document. And at the end of the day, you have about 300,000 pages. So it's a huge document with a lot of moving parts, and you need to get all of them right before you start manufacturing. Because if you don't, then you'll have defects, you'll have manufacturing problems, you maybe can't even release the car because it hasn't been certified. And so, but it hasn't always been this way. The old school mechanical cars probably had still 10 engineering domains, but maybe hundreds of engineers and maybe 10,000, let's say, clauses or pages in them. So they were, by an order of magnitude, much more simpler. And now
do you already have like the clients that are car manufacturers or something similar?
Mid-tier car manufacturers, like smaller ones.
Cool. And so I'm just wondering, like, what do you mean by with the project of car manufacturing? What is these engineering domains?
So what I mean by engineering domains is that what we help is write the specification. So the specification, requirements, whatever you want to call it, but the specification defines the car, and it's like it's just how the car will act. The 10 engineering domains is you have electrical, you have mechanical, you have heat, you have software, you have fluid mechanics, simulation. You have to deal with all of them. And they all have to be written out in this single document.
So you also come from digital space, so you see that like when we build digital products, we use all sorts of agile methods, right?
Yes.
Like iterative Scrum type of methods, Kanban, right? But then what you're describing, it seems like this waterfall type of huge
So that's actually the reason why we exist, is because the existing tools are built for a waterfall methodology, and that was completely fine when most of the car is mechanical and slightly electrical. Nowadays, it's software defined. And what that means is you have a part of the team is very happy working in waterfall, that's the hardware team, but the other part of the team, which is the software team, is working in agile. And you have this huge clash between them because one is, let's just be sequential, one thing after another, and the other team says, actually, we'll just program it, we'll go back and forth, we're being agile. Sometimes we'll send a release to the car after it's in the hands of the customer. And there's a lot of friction there, and there's a lot of struggle. And the R&D teams are actually failing to deliver profitable products. So like besides Tesla, every other electric car company in the Western world is unprofitable. Like Ford just released their quarterly reports, and they're losing money. They're losing twice as much on per electric car than they're making on an internal combustion engine car. So it's really putting them in front of a kind of an existential decision. Do we go with electric cars? Do we go with internal combustion engine cars? Do we try to do both? And at the same time, you have China coming in with really cheap electric cars. And so they really have to go where it matters, which is the R&D phase. And the earliest phase is the specification. And the specification defines 90% of the product's lifecycle costs.
And your system goes along with product's lifecycle also even after production, right?
Yes, because well, again, for example, in software, if you have a software problem, you go back to the specification to figure out who implemented this feature, what's the purpose, how it interacts with other things. Maybe we don't need it. Maybe we need to sort of fix it. But it's a live document that needs to stay with the car.
Okay, but what is the advantage of using Trace.Space instead of like having all of this documentation in some kind of document storage, right? And maybe giving some person responsibility to maintain it, right? Or what is the advantage using the Trace.Space here?
Because it's people, when they're making simpler products, they do use Excel, they use just documents. It's completely fine. But when you grow to having to collaborate internationally with tens of other companies, it just becomes untenable. It's just too many moving parts that you need to find a way to make it work together. And so that's where tools like ours come in, because you have not just documents, but the document has to be interlinked to other items in the document.
I know.
And that's the hard part.
I'm just wondering about that because I have not been involved in producing like international large hardware products, but I have been in multiple international consortia of EU projects where we do research. And this is similar stuff what you're talking about, the forming of consortia project, for example. We have like from, let's say, 10 different EU countries, large corporations and smaller companies, and they need to put together this one project proposal with lots of moving parts, references in what every party will do, what will be the deliveries, timelines, everything. So, and usually, what I have participated multiple from different project managers that are like, let's say, in Finland, in Greece, and some other countries. I've never seen that they're using some kind of system where it's automated and structured. It's mostly that there is a team of people who are maintaining huge set of documents and doing it in.
But how long is the document?
At the end, the document, let's say it's hundreds of pages. It's not like thousands, I guess.
But that's the difference. So it's when it's 100 pages, even if it's 1,000 pages, you don't need Trace.Space. You don't need any of the tools like this, because even though it's big and complex, it's not big and complex enough. It's when you start getting into tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, that's where it's just impossible to do it.
But I still think that what they do could be done better. How these consortia are made, from my experience, they usually have, because not everybody can read all of the documents. Yes. So what they do, they just somebody looks what is missing and then produce these questionnaires. So they constantly send out questionnaires to each partner. So answer this, and then somebody on the other side is trying to compile it constantly together. So that's one way how they operate.
Fundamentally, it's the same thing. You have it's just you have thousands of domain experts contributing to this huge document. And the document covers all these different things.
You also do questionnaires, like send out missing questions? No?
Well, because the document you're talking about is self-contained. And so everything that you need to know about the document is within the document. In here, you might have, let's say, you could start with, let's say, a safety feature, which is the braking distance should not be longer than 20 meters. Below that, out of that, you derive what kind of tires, what kind of braking system, then below that, what kind of calipers, what kind of materials on your brake pads. Below that, how are each of these things certified? Where are you going to source them? So suddenly it starts involving your suppliers. But then also the braking system is a feature for the customers. So because now we have sports brakes, because this is a sports car. And so it's not just a safety feature, and it's these like overlapping cross domains. That's what makes it, you need to be able to have, if you think of like a file system, you can have folders where it's just, folder within a folder. But for example, in Trace.Space, you can have multiple parents for this data structure. So it has multiple parents, multiple child items. So it creates a mesh of data, and you need to maintain this mesh rather than a single self-contained document.
So then we come down to AI. So I assume that AI is some kind of part of maintaining that, right? Or
yes. So there's a few ways we use AI to help maintain this. Because what we do is mainly text, the large language models lend themselves well to what we do. So what we do is we vectorize the whole database.
Sure.
Vectorization just means to transform it so the LLMs understand, I guess.
Semantic meaning. So but there's multiple ways how you can extract the meaning from text or any data. But then it's in this vectorized format. It is mathematically usable, so that you can like retrieve by the similarity how
Yes.
what is the angle, what is the distance between
Yes.
two data points, even though one might contain like huge table, another one might contain some paragraph of text, image. So all of this data space is now in this vector space, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what it is, and we've done some clever things to make it fast. Also, live edits. As soon as you're editing live, it will update sort of the vector embeddings and do like vector search, all that fun stuff. But from a business perspective, the use case is if you have a large amount of data. One is semantic search, which is pretty relatively simple. It's just if you have things that others have written, you might not know how do they call these things, and so you might say just let's say impact, and maybe it's the word that they're using is collision, and so you can find things even that you didn't know were there. The other thing we do is called generation, where you generate new pieces of these pages or paragraphs to say, okay, I would like to generate a few requirements about braking safety, and so it helps you generate that based on the data that you have. But I think the most interesting thing that people have found is suggested traces. And so the suggested traces will because it scanned the whole database, it will figure out where you have items that talk about the same things, or just places where you're talking about the same thing, but it's not explicitly linked. And that's where Trace.Space will come and say, hey, like, you're both working on the same thing in your own silos, but you're working on the same thing. So you might want to review what the other person is doing so you don't have a conflict later down the road.
But why exactly then the hardware projects? It could be applied for many types of projects, right?
Yes, but it's for us, we have to focus, and so we focus on where the pain is the highest, and in this case, it's software-defined automotive. But fundamentally, it's applicable in medical devices, it's applicable in defense, industrial, anything where you have to build critical components, also banking software, insurance software. This is all applicable, so you don't create conflicts and you resolve them as early as possible. So.
And how do you differentiate from, and maybe that's a part of the equation to that makes sense collaborating with you, is how you differentiate from just this hardware manufacturing companies hiring AI engineers and software developers and just use the, let's say, Microsoft Copilot platform and the cognitive services, whatever, and then everything is on the SharePoint. They have all of their documentations and folders. They can easily, not easily, but this is doable to replicate some of these functions with Copilot just internally. So. What are the advantages, and at which point they would?
We don't find ourselves competing with internally built tools most of the time. So sometimes people say we thought about it and then we tried it and now we're here.
Oh, right.
And so if you have a simpler product you're working on, you will do that. You will use Notion, Excel, Word. That's completely fine. It's just when it's become so complicated, you're better off buying a tool than investing money in building a tool for yourself. So unless you have something really specific,
this is kind of like how do you see your clients overlapping between each other? It seems from what you're telling that even though this is a hardware, they have these very different domains for the very different products. There's probably very different processes, and so it means that you will still need to have some customization for clients, right?
Well, the systems engineering, so what we do is systems engineering. Systems engineering as a methodology doesn't change much between the different sort of industries, because you tend to have a lot of the same engineering. So like even if it's defense, aerospace, automotive, you still have mechanical, electrical, plastic, and it's kind of the same engineering domains, but the methodology of systems engineering is the same. It's where you have to customize is, for example, for medical devices, because medical devices tend to be very simple products. Well, a lot of medical devices are simple products with a high threshold of safety, and that's where you're more focused on the compliance. Versus in automotive, you're more focused on compliance is there, but you're more focused on productivity because the product is complicated. And so in medical devices especially, you tend to have more specialized tools. But with Trace.Space, we made it more abstract. So like for example, the semiconductors don't call a requirement, they call it something else. But in our case, you can just define what the item is, what is a test, what is a requirement, what is a design solution.
But then, so when they come to you, they need to also adapt their processes to your processes, right? You don't.
No. So we deliberately made it in a way where you don't have to. We can replicate whatever process you have. So we're not forcing you to have a process.
Like if they, for example, previously have all their documentation and SharePoint, they have specific.
They tend to have an alternative tool. They tend to have a legacy tool in place.
Yeah.
Not nothing. They tend to have a legacy tool in place that is somehow failing them, and that's where they are looking at us. So we're competing against competitors of a similar category. And so but to give you an example of customization is, for example, we are the only ones that do this, but let's say, two companies that are fundamentally doing the same thing, some kind of self-driving bus. One company has an item called the requirement with an attribute that says this is a requirement about electricity, this is a requirement about mechanics, and so on. But another company has 10 different types of requirements. So they'll say electrical requirement, mechanical requirement. And fundamentally, it's the same thing, but the way they structure it is different. So the data model is different, but if you sort of look at it at a higher abstraction layer, what they're doing is the same thing. And so for us, it doesn't matter. You can configure it as 10 different requirement item types, or have a single requirement item type with an attribute that you define.
Okay, so and then you work with highly sensitive data. It seems like. So is it okay for you to use GPT or what do you do there?
It's not okay. Right. No, we use GPT APIs for demos. So we say, look, that's what it is, and you can use it. If once you start loading your own data, we say it's sort of up to you how you want to do it. But we can some companies have their own models that they're exposed by an API, so we can connect to that. It might be a bit slower, but fundamentally it's the same. Or if they would like, we can host our own model, like Olama. So it's not a problem.
But then the whole solution is on premises at the client side, or is it?
No, we can make it be like a sort of a private cloud thing, so we can replicate it on a thing like that. But like what's it called, a desktop based, we don't do it. It's too difficult, too expensive to build.
Okay, it's just interesting that working with very highly sensitive data, private cloud, even though it's not going to the OpenAI or whatever. So it seems that it is is it also giving, like, making the longer sales cycles, right? You need to go through many layers of legal to able to work with these companies, right?
So I think there's two things. So one is a lot of them say we want on-premise, but then we say, but wait a second, are you using Jira? Is it in the cloud? And mostly it's, well, actually, yes. Are you using Figma? Do you have an on-premise Figma? No, we don't. We actually have it in the cloud. So already your like secret designs, your secret tickets are already in the cloud. So what's the difference? We can put it on the same cloud as you. So it fundamentally doesn't matter. The AI models is a slightly different story, because I feel that people are irrationally fearful of what OpenAI might do to them. And so they might have like their own models. And in that case, we just say, look, fine, if you want that, we can have an air-gapped, our own open source model, and that's fine as well. It's not I think those are all just
excuses?
No, they're not excuses. It's just, it's a thing that is like, yes, you want security? Fine, no problem. We'll deliver to your security standard. Same thing with legal. That's not a make or break decision. So because if your product is inferior, no amount of security or legal stuff is gonna is going to sort of close the deal. So the product fundamentally has to be superior, and then you just deal with the legal and the security issues.
Okay, that's a good point. Then, what is the financial the benefit of using your product? Like, how do you sell it? Because it's not just like, okay, you will have now order right in your house, right? Or do you do that? Or
well, no, it's not about order, because
Yeah.
they do have something. So we're not selling them, hey, you should do systems engineering, because they're already doing it. What we're saying is, first of all, because you used to do mechanical, now it's software driven, so you have 10 times more things to deal with, and the existing tools just can't handle that scale. And so our backend is better in a way that can handle the scale. That's number one. Number two is we have a parity between our UX and our API. And so anything that you can do with the UX can be done with the API, and we see everybody is extending these tools. Everybody needs to connect them to other things in their tech ecosystem. And and sometimes people even ask us, oh, can you write in your tool via an API? It's like, yes, of course, this is a modern software tool, but that just gives you a sense of what the level of API friendliness is expected, is sort of prevalent in the industry. It's very, very low. And so for us to have it like kind of an open API that you can easily connect to, write, read, do what you need, it is a game changer. And the third thing is we are AI kind of native, or let's say it's deeply embedded in everywhere. And so we can start delivering interesting features that were never done before, like these suggested traces. It was just not possible. There was no technology that could do it. And because for us it's deeply integrated, we can do it efficiently.
How do you sell it financially? Like you come from the finance, so it's like if there would be a rational person against it, look at this as an expense in my budget.
Well, because the incumbent legacy tools deliver less and cost more.
So you replace some other tool, right?
Yes, we replace one of 4 tools out there. And for us, the key challenge is migration, and that's where we tap into experienced sort of solutions engineers that can help us do the migration. And they also have experience with other tools, and so they are very able, very successfully can position us against them and can make a good implementation for the customers.
Okay, so this is Trace.Space. This is basically tool. Do you see it also as a replacement for some human workforce also, or is it complementary right now?
It's mostly to augment humans. So it replaces maybe some consulting work. For example, we have when you write stuff for systems engineering, there's a systems engineering professional body that tells you exactly how you're supposed to write it. And instead of just writing it, giving it off to consultants to reread, in Trace.Space, it already highlights where you have, let's say, quality checks, where your writing is not as defined by the professional body. So in that sense, we replace that. But for the engineer who's doing this work, it's just much more helpful. So they don't have to finish it, send it somewhere else, get the answer back. Right away, as they're writing, they can see, actually, this doesn't meet the professional body rules, so I can change it on the spot.
Okay. So looking forward, like and connecting your previous experience with what you just said, is there is this notion of future where we're going, where there would be a solo entrepreneurship, where we would have like just one like department manager or founder running different AI agents that do the work for the business processes, different business processes, and you already mentioned some of this, like for example, prospecting, right, in the sales, and also now this part for the documentation. So how far are we, and what do you think, like from your operational experience, how much of these things we can automate already?
I don't think it's actually possible, even with huge advances in, well, not say huge, with what we see today. I don't think it's possible to have, basically, if the question is whether I could build Trace.Space alone with a bunch of AI agents, I don't think so, because building a company is just, it's multifaceted. So
What about like simpler cases? Okay, you're talking like kind of a really extreme case where you have very niche product with very super complex projects, as like you said.
But even for, I mean, whatever product I'm building, I'm not a software developer. No, but so I cannot check if the AI engines are doing a good job. So I can sort of, if something goes wrong, I mean,
there are no code platforms. You can stick something together, feel if it works, not works.
I think, well, it's probably possible to build a small business with AI agents, but the problem is if you can do it easily with AI agents, there's probably 10,000 other people that can do it easily. So you can each have a small piece of this, a sliver of this market. If you want to build something that's truly can become huge, and this is what we're trying to do with Trace.Space, then you have to differentiate, you have to go where others are not going. And the AI agents can only go where others have been before. I mean, if you look at this, we talked about the AI junior salesperson. There's already like 15 companies doing this. So it's just, their profit will get outcompeted. And there's no way for them to take a huge share of the market because the product is basically just too simple. It's not giving enough value. So everybody just gets a sliver. Somebody might make it big by maybe on the back of branding, maybe some unique stuff, but fundamentally it's not a good market to be in. Well, what we're doing, it's so messy, so hard that you throw good people at it, you augment the people, yes, with AI agents, but you can't replace all of them. I think it would be very hard for us to replace any one member of the team.
Do it slowly, like for example in Trace.Space, like you're not asking like immediately replace whole processes in the Trace.Space with AI agents, but let's say start adding some AI agent that do the job of electrical engineering in some part, another part, slowly building up.
So if we're talking about if we're talking about let's say domain-specific engineering, domain-specific AI agents, I think those are almost impossible to build because you don't have the data to build them is not available out there. Because if the analogy is you have these radiology AIs that can scan your thing and it can detect like melanoma. Melanoma is really easy to get the data for because in Australia, like half the people get melanoma at some point. So already 15 million images you're able to obtain. But if you have rare diseases, AI is very bad at finding rare diseases because the data is just not there. And the same thing with engineering, like engineering specific data is like a rare disease because all the data is, first of all, it's private. It's like core IP for companies, so they keep it hidden, understandably. But it also is like, okay, for this company, attaching this tube to this like plate here is fine, but for another company, moving it by a millimeter, it just ruins the whole thing. And so it means that everything is so unique, it's so rare. The combination is maybe like, this is the only company in the world that does things this way. And so unless you do your own labeling, unless you do that, and there are companies that do it, like there's Raycon in our industry.
There are different types of AI. You're talking about, let's say, supervised learning, where you have data and then you have a very reliable solution. But then at the same time, you probably have seen that you can do things based on reward functions. For example, reinforcement learning,
like that Q star stuff, where they try to do.
No, it's like even like in computer games, AlphaGo, for example, they even wrote a book after the how DeepMind won the Go game, right? Yeah. So the strategies which invented AI was then written by humans as a strategy. But then this strategy was invented the same way as they just got Nobel prizes in chemistry for AI, right? Where the protein folding, where basically you could do things previously that were also didn't have data how to train proper protein folding. So the thing is that there are different ways how to build AIs. It's especially generative AIs, which could self-explore, self-try things in some kind of simulation environments and learn how to do the things in the best way. So it's it is the argument that data is the main roadblock for doing this. This is maybe not the case always, right? So
Yes, well,
like for
I think
example,
that
in big pharma,
what I would think
there's
about with the
yeah.
protein folding, it's a single domain. So it's like chemistry and protein
Yeah.
folding. So, but in engineering, you have the way that, let's say, the tube connects to the plate. There's heat, there's maybe electricity, there's vibration, there's torque. So there's all these things that, and you have to kind of you can unleash an agent that
Yep.
just tries it, simulates
Yeah,
it, simulates whatever you
yeah.
need. But then at the end of the day, all you would get is just the connector of a single tube to a plate. But you need
Yep.
to build a whole car where you have hundreds of thousands of these things that need to work together.
And I would not be that confident that this would not be possible to fully automate at some point. It's just that the thing is, I hear your argument about availability of data. That's, I think, is valid. Like if you would have data, it would be much easier to do. But technically, if you have these some kind of simulation environments, specific agents for specific small pieces, then all of those agents are then controlled by the next agent, by the next agent.
No, I think theoretically it's possible that even now that there's some like stuff I read that the like sort of the agent gets some premise wrong and it just goes off. And because to do what you're talking about, you would probably need a weeks of compute power just to sort of sift through it all. But if you get it wrong somewhere on the way, then you've literally lost a week. Like if you look at the ChatGPT, the advanced voice, it costs more per hour than the Philippines call center. So at the end of the day, sure, you could theoretically build it, but whether the cost actually makes sense to sort of to build a car or develop some kind of device is, let's see. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
I like
maybe
the
not.
cost argument. Again, you're saying you're now to operations, but you always have this financial edge. This is valid. I think very valid in the world of AI agents. One is what you described about very trivial agents where you have like very small slices of the markets, but I believe there's many opportunities for very smart agents as well.
Yep.
But then it comes to the price. Like,
Yes.
is it like cheaper to hire somebody in some developing countries?
But if you have, for example, in this engineering, an experienced engineer will look at what you've sort of drawn and say, that's not going to work. And like, let me do it this way, and then I know it's going to work, and that might take them an hour, let's say. And even if they're a highly paid engineer, that hour is probably still going to be cost less than unleashing a bunch of agents that use a lot of electricity to do the same work that a human can do much faster.
There is something to it. Even the language models are not yet optimal use of energy and all of the things, but they're going there. So with all of these many technologies circling around us right now, and your experience, like what kind of skills are like necessary nowadays for people? We initially talked about, like, for example, we have these junior salespeople doing the prospecting, right? And
Yes.
normally, in the historical sense, we had like you were a junior salesperson, then you're a medium,
an apprenticeship,
then you go up to the professional salespeople. Now we don't need anymore those junior parts which can be automated. Then actually, how nowadays we can get to the level that is necessary, basically, to be the operational person. If lots of operations and processes can be, the easiest ones can be automated already, so you rely on those. You don't learn how to do them themselves, maybe.
I'll say what I believe is I think it will be a problem that sort of almost governments need to solve, because they are the ones that will be, well, not they, let's say we are the ones that will be stuck with a bunch of citizens that sort of don't really have a job. And so I don't think individual companies will start suddenly saying, you know what, we'll hire a few people just so they can do the job that the AI does for it, just so they can train. That's probably a valid path, and that covers maybe a small percentage of what used to be employed. But I think with the reduction of like your sort of life earnings and like the life that you expect in a Western country, you couple that with not being able to get junior jobs, that's going to be a problem that we'll have to face somehow. And I actually don't have an answer. I don't know. Maybe you could have an AI trading agent that actually trains them to do something.
I don't
But
think that's
but
totally.
because, for example, my job is I don't have to do like anything specific. I just have to get to a specific outcome. And so for me, hiring let's say a domain expert is not what I need to do. I need to generate an outcome. And so what I would hire a person that can figure out which tool is the right one, whether it be AI, human, or whatever, to do this for me. But that's a very different skill set from becoming a junior salesperson. This would be a junior jack of all trades that can figure out which thing to tack.
That's really interesting direction, because like as tools become more powerful, there is more specialization, and then at the same time, like all of these super specialized things can be automated. Now to succeed, you actually cannot be super specialized.
Yes. Well, you need to know that it's available. Yeah. But this transition actually did happen in marketing, because marketing, if you look at the TV show Mad Men, that's what marketing was. It was guys just sort of getting a brilliant idea, putting it on a poster, and that was marketing. Nowadays, marketing is mainly driven by tools. It's about getting the right stack. It's about getting the data. And the creativity is almost left to the AI, because you just say, look, you need to get leads. Just build whatever ads you need to do, build whatever words sort of you need to do just to get the conversion. And it just experiments until it gets the perfect ad for that period of time. And so it already has happened in marketing, and you could have a 3-person marketing team running a $1 billion revenue company easily.
This is the interesting time we're living at. I think it will be interesting to see the next generation of entrepreneurs, basically that have all of these AI agents, the capabilities, but don't have the experience of doing things like the hard way.
Yeah.
So how this will gonna work? This will be interesting to watch, right?
Yes. For sure, I think there's domain expertise will still be relevant, because like domain expertise, empathy, because at the end of the day, it's humans buying what you're selling. And so you need to convince I mean, at the B2C, you can sort of experiment it out, but in B2B, you still have a leadership team, you have a strategy, you have to convince these people that this is the right direction to take. And so I think there will still be, you'll still need to have domain knowledge, empathy, human skills, let's say. But yeah.
But again, it's always, I think, easy to start thinking about these high level skills, human skills, the strategies, the things and that. But you remember, you went through the bootstrapping phase. You went through all of these hardships to understand how this works. So and this cannot be just skipped. So basically, probably cannot be skipped. For example, somebody just coming out of the university, okay, I will just think about high level stuff and never do actual these things which can be automated. So it's kind of tricky.
I'm not sure if I agree with that, to be honest, because I don't think I ever did, let's say, other than in the bank, and I don't think I ever did like the hard work. A lot of it was because the finance fundamentally is a high level thing. Like, so the hard work is, there's no such thing. You just sort of, people do the hard work, and then they're just numbers. You just get their numbers.
You did, you made the financial models, Excels. AI agent did not made it for you. Plus also you invented the bottom up, not invented.
Yes, yeah. No, I agree with that, but that's the thing, because I think a financial model it's not about, the purpose of the financial model is not the financial model, is what assumptions do you agree with your peers? Like what it's about what you put into it, not what comes out. What comes out is kind of almost secondary. It's more about sitting down, discussing, agreeing. That's the financial model. And that's why when I don't, for example, I've never used templates, because that's not what it's about. It's not about creating a pretty set of numbers with nice charts. It's about the operationally talking to people and figuring out how does the company that we're all working in tick, like how does it work? That's what it's about. And so for that, the AI agent can sort of
We'll see. So you'll see if to succeed in future in entrepreneurship in life, you would need to somehow train yourself from bottom up, or it will be enough from the high level. So right. So this will be interesting.
Yeah. I think that if I do look back a couple of years, even just I just know a year, there are things that I'm using every day now that just didn't exist.
Yep.
And now I'm like, oh, if I had to go back to that, I would be wasting so much time. So it's already happened in many cases.
It is interesting the thought experiment. Would I be here if I have the same tools as today, and maybe I would be much farther away, or maybe not so far. So it's difficult to tell. But yeah, great talking to you.
Yes, thank you very much.
It was really insightful conversation. As at least I learned a lot. I feel that Mikus have like this deep knowledge and experience of different these operational aspects that no wonder you're also like the mentor for startups, right? So definitely reach out to Mikus regarding these kind of questions if you have time to answer something.
I'm on LinkedIn, so just ping me. But if you do, just write that I'm a startup looking just for help or advice. And, I'm always
and all the luck with the Trace.Space, and also especially if the video comes in the circles of somebody building large hardware products. That's something definitely to look into. And nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for joining another episode of AI Ranch. And as a gratitude for our work, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, and meet you in the next episode.